Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English 1110. This is your week 5 overview lecture. I will be doing this audio only, but I am excited to dive into what we're doing this week in terms of your readings, viewings, lectures, and assignments for June 6th to June 12th in this class. All right, so I want to start off with a content warning that the zines listed in this week's readings visualize and depict the following topics: mental health, crippling anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, racism, blackface, cultural appropriation, profanity, and structural oppression, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, bipolar disorder and trauma, nudity and sex, colorism, Western beauty standards. If reading any of these materials will be triggering, please do not hesitate to reach out to me to discuss alternate assignments that can replace reading the zines, though please note that the learning objectives and focus of this alternate assignment will align with why these texts were assigned. So if any or all of these are an issue, definitely reach out to me via email or during office hours or via phone call, and we can figure out a way to make sure that the learning space is safe for you and supported, and that you are not, re-exposed to something that's potentially very triggering, okay? I also apologize if you're getting any background noise. There is always construction happening on my street, and so unfortunately that's a feature of these lectures. Looking at this week at a glance, you've got 2 lectures to watch: the overview and in-depth, 4 zines to read, and 1 assignment to complete, which is process post number 3. Now, I ask that you first watch the video titled Week 5 Overview, which if you are watching/listening to this lecture, you are already doing. Please note that you have no music videos to watch this week. You only have readings for this week, and it's expected that you read each of these readings closely. It's ideal that you read them twice to allow for time to process the visual and verbal elements of the texts, okay? So please, please, please read them through a few times. It's okay if a few of those times is skimming, but it's going to be really important that you don't just rely on one read through to be the end all be all of your engagement with these texts. Now, I ask that you read all 4 of these zines in full. Note that all of these readings are zines drawn as comics, so I will use these terms interchangeably. That's not always the case. Zines are not always comics, and comics are not always zines, but this particular week, we are engaging with zines drawn as comics, okay? Now, this week's readings, or primary sources, you are required to read all 4 zines. These zines vary in length, but keep in mind that comics are a combination of word and image, so each page will not take you as long to read as a page in a novel that consists of only words. It is encouraged that you read the zines more than once so that you pay attention to all of the details in the zine's content and form. It may be helpful to review the questions in process post number 3 before reading to familiarize yourself with what details to be on the lookout for. So the 4 zines you have for this week are Winging It by Peyton Del Toro, Couldn't Afford Therapy, So I Made This by Lawrence Lindell, Marie and Worrywart, Comics About Anxiety by Jen Woodall, and Your Black Friend by Ben Passmore. All 4 of these are pretty short. They're not going to be super, super lengthy, so do not panic if when you open the file it says like 8 pages, 10 pages, etc. Again, comics are a combination of word and image, so this is going to go by a lot quicker than if I was assigning you a full-on novel. Now, an important note for this week's concepts is that typically I would assign an excerpt from Frederick Luis Aldama's Latinx Superheroes in Mainstream Comics to be a companion piece to the zines assigned for this week. However, the secondary reading has been left off of the readings for this week to encourage you to focus your energies towards reading the zines more than once. In your process post responses, you will want to be attentive to both what the zines are about, which is the plot, and how they look, the appearance of the page and the panels. So thinking again back to content and form. The core concepts from this reading are featured throughout the week 5 lecture so that you can work with the concepts without having to read the chapter. Part of what you will be assessed on in this week's process post is how well you apply these concepts to your analysis of the content and form of the zines, okay? So I want you to incorporate some of the language from the Aldama chapter into your process post responses. It's going to be important to demonstrate your comprehension of concepts alongside, demonstrating that you are familiar with and have read the readings for this week. Next, I ask you to watch the video titled Week 5 Lecture, which is, of course, your typical in-depth lecture. I will concentrate much of my energies there on, articulating what zines are and then, kind of doing a walkthrough with the Aldama chapter. So it is going to be very important that you watch and listen to it. I know sometimes it can be tempting to exclusively work with the Google Slides for this class. It's fine if that's, what you do. I understand. Though I do encourage you to watch the lecture just because I explain things. And I think that can sometimes be a bit more helpful than just looking at a block of text on the slide, okay? And finally, I ask that you complete the following assignment, which is process post number 3. You have done 2 of these already, so they should be very familiar. Now, process post number 3 is due on June 13th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to Carmen. As a reminder, assignments marked, for the month of June can be turned in up until the last day of June, so you do have some time. The prompt asks you to read the 4 zines assigned for this week. It is ideal that you read each of the zines twice to allow for time to observe and analyze their visual and verbal elements. This step is important so that you can meaningfully address both the content and form of these texts in your process post responses. Then respond to the following questions, 3 to 5 sentences minimum per question. And note you must write about all of the assigned zines in this process post. And before I move on, I just want to emphasize that what this prompt is asking you to do is write about each of the assigned zines, which means that you want to write about each of them once. There are 4 questions in the process post, and there are 4 zines that you've been assigned this week. So that means you should select a different zine to write about in each of the responses. If you write about only one zine for all 4 questions, or only some of the zines in process post number 3, you are not meeting the requirements of the prompt, which would prompt me then to mark the assignment down. Okay, I've had that happen in the past where students miss the part that they're supposed to write about all 4 zines in their process post, and then they only write about one of them, or they split it between 2 of them. No, 1 question per zine, okay? So let's talk about those questions then. So the first question is the comic and its cover. When responding to this question, select 1 zine to write about. So again, 1 that you're not going to talk about in the other questions. Based on what you learned from the in-depth lecture, why are covers of text so important? What constitutes an engaging cover? Of the zines you read for this week, which zine has the most engaging cover? Describe the cover. What information is featured on the cover of this zine, and how does the creator geometrize and storyfy the cover? All right, so what I'm asking you to concentrate on here is selecting a zine from this week that had the most impactful and engaging cover in your reading experience. And I want you to walk through not only the larger context of why covers are so important based on what you've engaged with the lecture, but then I want you to also define for me what's going to constitute an engaging cover. Like what's going to be successful in connecting with a reader and prompting them to do exactly what Obama says we want them to do that I talk about in the lecture. Of the zines that you read for this week, which one do you identify as having the most engaging cover, and how are you assessing that? Right? What is the metric that you're measuring that against? And I want you to make sure that you describe that cover. And I want you to really, emphasize for me, what is the creator geometrizing and storyfying on the cover, which are 2 terms that are going to be defined in the lecture this week, okay? So again, why do covers matter? What makes a cover engaging? Which of these zines you read this week had an engaging cover that you really want to highlight? Talk about what's on that cover, and then really walk me through how that cover is geometrized and storyfied. So you've really kind of got a 5-part question here. And again, 3 to 5 sentences is the minimum to write about. You are welcome to write more than that, but please do not write less than that, okay? Question number 2 is close reading content and form. Again, when responding to this question, select 1 zine to write about. Of the zines you read for this week, which text's overall page layout is most engaging in telling the story? Describe the pages. What aspects of the zine's pages and design effectively communicate the story to the reader? Based on what you learned from the in-depth lecture, what is the relationship between content and form? Why is it important to pay attention to both content and form when analyzing a visual text like a zine? So this question is asking you to focus on page layout overall, right? So when you're skimming through, reading through, looking through zines for this week, which one had the pages that overall caught your eye the most? Walk me through what those pages look like. How are they composed? What are they set up to tell the story like? And I want you to really identify for me, what is the relationship between content and form that we've been talking about each week? And why is it important to pay attention to those details when you're analyzing something like a zine? Like, what is the significance of that relationship, okay? So in question 2, you're really grounding your response in a particular zine and then using that to make a larger point. Question 3 is taking a closer look. Again, Pick one zine to write about. Select one page from a zine to close read that is analyzed very closely, that you find to be both visually engaging and significant in advancing the plot. Describe the page. What geometrizing and storifying elements are utilized on this page? How do these elements contribute to why this page is visually engaging and an important moment in the overall story? Okay, so here you're going to be focusing on one page from one zine. So question 2 is about pages overall. Question 3 is about one page from one zine. And I want you to really identify, why is this page a standout? What is its significance and contribution to the rest of the story? What is it doing? What does it look like? What is it contributing? And then kind of what are the geometrizing and storifying tools that you see at work here, right? Speech bubbles, thought bubbles, character design, costuming, shapes, right? Movement, so on and so forth, okay? And what is it about this page with these elements that are contributing to the larger story and narrative? Why is this moment important? And finally, close reading a panel. Again, pick one zine to write about. Select one panel from a zine to close read that is analyzed very closely, that represents either the central conflict or provides important insight into who the protagonist is. Describe the panel. What geometrizing and storifying elements are utilized in this panel? How do these elements contribute to why this panel is visually engaging? How do these elements contribute to why this panel is an important moment in the conflict or in the protagonist's development? Okay. So what you are concentrating then on here is you're going from cover in question 1 to pages in question 2 to one page in question 3 and then one panel in question 4. And so with this panel, I want you to again attend to the geometrizing and storifying elements. So each of your responses to these questions make it super clear that you understand those concepts. And I want you to really identify how this panel and those geometrizing and storifying elements contribute to the larger narrative. And why is this moment important? Why did you point to the specific panel? What is interesting about it, engaging about it, and why is it an important one to attend to within the scope of the story, okay? Now, I've included at the bottom of this prompt some details you might consider when close reading the texts, though you can focus on others if they, stand out to you. One of which is, are there any words or conversations? If so, how do they appear on the page? How do pages make use of speech bubbles or thought bubbles, or are any pages silent? Do pages feature multiple panels, splash pages, or single panels, which I talk about in the lecture? Are pages or panels drawn in colors, all black and white, or a mix of both? Do words ever appear outside of speech bubbles or thought bubbles? If so, what do they look like? How are characters drawn? What does the setting look like? Are pages very full or more open? Do pages or panels ever represent thoughts or emotions of a character? How so? So these are guiding questions. You don't need to address any or all of these necessarily in every single response in the process post, but I've provided this guiding question list here in case you're really struggling with the concepts for this week, or if you're really struggling with the readings. This is kind of my snapshot guide of things to be thinking about, looking for, just kind of keeping in your brain as you are navigating this assignment, okay? Now that is everything that I have for you this week. I do want to remind you again of that deadline that assignments can be submitted up until the last day of the month. Assignments submitted by the recommended weekly deadline should be turned into Carmen. Assignments submitted by the end of the month should be emailed to me at sweeney.464@buckeyemail.osu.edu. Please email them to me. Sometimes sending them by Carmen Messenger, they can get lost because I do get a lot of messages there. Email is the ideal and asked place to submit things to. Okay. Again, there's no late penalty if you submit work after the recommended weekly deadline and before the end of the month deadline. Please note that missing assignments not submitted by the end of the month will be marked as a 0 on Carmen. Please also make sure that you submit your end of the month work if you're choosing that deadline by the 11:59 p.m. Eastern time frame. I do not want things coming in after that point because then they are technically not submitted by the monthly deadline. And since I'm super flexible with the monthly deadline, please do me the solid and turn things in by 11:59 p.m. Eastern on the last day of the month if you are choosing that option, okay? That is everything that I have for you today in English 1110. I hope that this lecture was helpful for you as you start thinking about things that are due this week and that you've got going on. And I really, truly hope from the bottom of my heart that you are enjoying this class because I am enjoying this class very much. And I love teaching 1110. And I hope that, I know in the grand scheme of things, you did not necessarily choose to be in this class because 1110 is a requirement, but I truly, absolutely hope that this class is one that you don't mind and at best enjoy. All right, take care of yourselves. Have a good rest of your week. I hope that there's time for time off, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.